Playwright.
We have Mac,
Hi, very pleased to be here.
both hailing from the tri-state New York area.
Mm-hmm.
And we have our illustrious Max, Zillow Max.
Hello.
Tonight's topics are going to be Defiance, Doctor Who, and the tragic incidences that have been going on over the past week with the Boston bombings and the tragic accident that happened in West Texas.
I'm hearing an echo.
Somebody have an echo?
Yeah, I think maybe somebody's got their speakers on a little bit too loud.
Oh, that's probably me. Let me turn them down. Yeah, that's me. You lose it now?
Yeah. Well, it's actually, it was Steve that was echoing, and I guess. So.
Oh. And I'm turning my speakers back up.
Well, no.
Yeah, it wasn't me. I don't have speakers enabled. I've got my headset on.
Yeah. Yeah, hang on.
Yes.
Let me grab my headphones.
Oh, sure.
While you guys are talking, I'll grab my headphones.
Not a problem. All right, so why don't we just jump on into it right now with the Boston bombing here? I mean, who was shocked to see that, really?
I don't know about shock. I don't know about shock. I mean, I think we all probably. I think we all sort of known for years that you know we're going to have another moment like this, and you know, I think some people thought, you know, there are certainly many other countries around the world where not that it's ever routine, but that not that it's ever something anyone takes lightly, but that it becomes more part of the fabric of life. And in the United States, that hasn't been the case for us, and it's, you know, I think there may have been sort of a feeling that something like this we might have been expecting this to happen even sooner. I don't know if anyone was shocked, but I think everybody's pretty upset about it.
Shaken. I ran Chicago 2 years ago in 2010, and it got me thinking, because I was wanting to maybe run the Boston Marathon sometime in the next few years. I'll tell you, I've kind of gotten to the point now where I feel like something horrible is just going to happen every 6 months, and you know, that's just it. I mean, we had Hurricane Sandy, and we had Sandy Hook, we had the Dark Knight shooting, and now we got this insanity. So yeah, I mean, this week that really threw me for a loop, and I don't think anything good's going to come out of it.
Actually, I realized with you bringing up the Sandy Hook shooting, I realized that the way that I'm talking about this is like I'm talking about this as if it's in a different category than the Sandy Hook shooting, as if it's built like 9/11 and then this and then no other examples of whatever this is in between. But actually, the truth is, I should say, we don't actually know what this is yet. Not all of the facts have emerged, and in terms of what differentiates this from something like a Sandy Hook shooting or the Dark Knight shooting, that's not completely clear yet, and I shouldn't be talking as if it is.
Right. No, we're all handling it differently and everything. My compliment, I've got to go ahead and do a thumbs up on whoever the officer was that was able to go ahead and shoot the second suspect right through the tongue. You know, I've got to give props up for that one.
It was a good shot, I suppose. I don't know. I'm a little horrified, kind of, by the response in Boston. I'll take a sort of minority stance on this, but and maybe it's just part of the grieving process after something like that happens, and you feel so powerless. You're going to want to have, like, I think the the thing they're going over is like Boston strong right now.
Right.
But I mean, I think what I found most disturbing was how quickly the police state appeared in Boston, and how cool everyone was with the police going door to door and essentially declaring martial law in the city. And I mean, after seeing what the police have done here in New York with regards to Occupy, that was actually extremely upsetting, and it was really creepy to me to see like the tanks and the police officers being cheered even after they'd caught the guy.
Yeah, I could see where that would be a bit off the cuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a good shot.
Well, the thing is, the thing that I'm thinking is that they were just prepared for something like that. They were expecting something like that. An event, and it seems like with events like these, they actually have Homeland Security actually have eyes on there. Sometimes the eyes are too late. That happens. It's terrible with what happened and everything, but I honestly think that they knew something was going to go on, and that they were already prepped for it.
I don't know. I'm all the facts in this haven't come out, but one of the other things that creeps me out about the whole thing is that people are kind of comparing these guys to radical jihadists because the one brother had some connection with that.
Both did, actually.
Yeah. And I really kind of think that's like comparing. It's like saying like the guy who did Columbine was a space marine. From what I've seen of these two, they didn't really seem to actually be jihadists. They seemed to be people who maybe identified with that. But yeah,
they were extremists. I would agree with you. I don't think that these were jihad al-Fala. No, I don't.
It sounded a little like the Lion King, what you were doing right there.
But I honestly think that these guys were of some faction. I mean, because there was a history of it.
I don't know, Mac. How long have you been in New York? Were you in New York for like 9/11 or anything like that? Have you seen anything similar?
Yeah, I moved to New York in 1998. I did live in New York in 9/11. I was working in Midtown, and in order for me to return to my apartment in Astoria that evening, or that after work let out, I had to walk across the 59th Street Bridge because, of course, the trains weren't working, and there was definitely it was the very first experience in my life as a deeply sheltered American of hearing about a news story and then walking outside and seeing the news story right there. Because, as I walked across the 59th Street Bridge, of course, all of Lower Manhattan was engulfed in smoke. And it's one of those things where, I could certainly imagine that folks around the world could very easily imagine that what I'm saying right now is pretty sheltered and infantile, but it was a remarkable awakening moment for me. It was like, okay, the news is actually, all you have to do is travel a certain distance and you can actually be in the place where the news is happening. And the United States has enjoyed a period of time where large stretches of it, can often feel as if it's, sheltered from some of the worst of it, but then some recent events have happened where in the last 15, 20 where that's not the case. And and for me, that moment of like hearing all of that play out on the radio when I was at work, and then walking across the 59th Street Bridge and seeing this gigantic news story with this extraordinary human cost suddenly very real right in front of me. I was looking directly at it. That was a pretty remarkable moment for me.
Did you see, like, was Boston's response similar to New York's response after 9/11, or is what you've been seeing, is that new?
Well, the big difference is that, of course, after 9/11, nobody thought there was anyone in New York to go and catch. So there was it was interesting what you brought up about the kind of police state situation before, because I feel like in terms of in situations where there is a potential imminent danger, then sometimes you kind of have to pick what the bad thing is that's going to happen in response. The thing that I would have found to have been worse than what happened in Boston would have been a situation of the response being vigilante in nature and disorganized in nature and being carried out principally by private citizens. The danger, the situation we have is like, okay, I don't discount the cautionary tone that you're taking as far as that is, Brent, but what we did see is a situation of an extremely kind of like a huge clampdown, a huge lockdown, followed by that receding and going away after the crisis passed. Now, it's not that it's not disturbing how quickly that can happen, but it is, in my view, the lesser evil to a situation where you functionally have armed private citizens carrying out hunts and acting as a lynch mob. At a certain point, the police are accountable in a way that private citizens are not. And as far as freedom goes, I do take a certain level of comfort from that.
I suppose that does make sense to me. And it really could have been a lot worse. I mean, the police did initially arrest the, I forget what his name was, but they arrested
yeah, I know who you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah. And like, just because he was, running while Arabic. And at least, like, he didn't get physically lynched. At least he was eventually released when it was obvious he had nothing to do with it. But I don't know. After what I've seen out of the police here in New York, I don't think I can ever really look at the police the same way as I did before Occupy. But that also, we were talking about being sheltered, and I think I was definitely very sheltered before I had those run-ins in Zuccotti. So, do we want to move on, or do we want to keep doing this this particular?
Well, let's take it. So let's see what's going on, with West Texas. I mean, that was actually pretty horrible as well. I mean, that was like, they saw a mushroom cloud, for Pete's sakes.
Yeah.
I mean, here's a fertilizer plant. I can see where it would be a mushroom cloud. I mean, it's a fertilizer plant. There, lots of ammonia, lots of different, compost type ingredients. But to go ahead and actually take out a town, this thing nearly took out the whole town. It took out a complete apartment complex in less than 5 seconds. I mean, totally, completely shook it down to its foundation.
Now, I don't know I have to confess that I don't know the latest on this. Has there been some more recent information on how they think this happened? What they think was it?
No, I've been following
neglect?
the story, and so far they're still investigating it, and they're still not. They're not releasing anything if they do know something. If there's something coming out, that they're not talking about it. They're about as tight-lipped as dark matter in a black hole.
Okay.
Well, you were going to say something?
Me?
Yeah. It looked like you were about to.
No, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Okay. No, I think like with West Texas, from what I saw, I've really only gotten a couple of things that I've gleaned from Facebook. I haven't followed it as closely as Steve. I think this is definitely going to show itself to be a case of corporate neglect, very much in the same way, and it actually kind of explains why we haven't gotten a lot of information on it, but why they're being very careful. When there was a big pipe rupture.
Are you talking about maybe another BP?
I think it's definitely another BP, and I think even there was a big pipe rupture just a few weeks ago going through Louisiana. It was, and Exxon put a lot of pressure on the government of that state, and they set up a no-fly zone.
I heard about that.
Yeah, so that you couldn't even photograph what had happened from the air, and it shook an entire town. They had to be evacuated. So I think a similar thing's happening where this time it's a very rich person, very powerful company, and they're just making sure that we don't hear about it at this point, which would explain the fact that we're not getting the information and there's not the obsession. Then, of course, also, people are still really focused on Boston too. So
yeah, as many people pointed out, this would have been the top wall-to-wall news story under other circumstances. And it is an interesting thing about how we think about hazard in the United States, so how we think about danger, how we think about threat. It raises an interesting issue that, like, threats seem more dangerous when they and seem to attract more news coverage when it seems as if they are being manifested by individuals or small groups with malevolent, hostile intent, and even more so if they seem to be, if they're not Americans or if they have like an appearance of being un-American in some way. It doesn't have the same. It's interesting to think about why Boston was the bigger story, because again, I want to very strongly stress here, we do not know what the situation was in Texas being examined, and I know that, like, with in a situation with the maintenance of an anhydrous ammonia refrigeration system, like was in effect at this plant, is an incredibly dangerous thing that requires a meticulous amount of maintenance of this, in terms of figuring out what went wrong here. There's a lot of different ways it could go, but it's interesting to think that okay, Brent, what you're talking about, like corporate neglect, like particularly if it's a situation that if it turns out that cost cutting was involved, or something along those lines, if a reduction of personnel that meant that there was less ability to keep certain systems monitored. It's interesting that is kind of we regard that as less of a threat, even though it could potentially take just as many lives. That explosion, you saw the photographs of the leveled, was it a nursing home nearby, and all of the houses nearby?
Across the street, actually.
Yeah, where it's like it was completely. Oh, yeah, you're right. Absolutely, yeah, across the street. There's a thing of like, because there wasn't a couple of people with a malevolent plan to harm others, because it was harm that came from neglect or missing details or reliance on systems that are perhaps dangerous. It's a smaller news story to have these two things happen at the same time. For some reason, the one scares us more than the other. It's curious. Right. I wonder why that is.
Right.
Well, that's actually interesting, because I wanted to play off that a little bit. One of my friends, who's a Mexican communist, he was doing a class that I was taking on Mao, and he brought up kind of in the context of revolutionary violence. And I remember, like, with Occupy, this was really, really popular. We were always going back and forth, are we a peaceful movement? Are we, and of course we were a peaceful movement. We couldn't even hold up our signs in a stiff wind. But, like, he brought up this point where he was going through sort of the history of revolutionary violence, and he pulled up this big picture, and there was a kid who ran into the street, and the picture had him caught throwing like a beer bottle, or maybe it was a Molotov cocktail, but there wasn't any flame on it. I think it was just a beer bottle. He's like throwing a bottle at a tank rolling down the middle of the street. And most Americans, in fact mine, my first reaction was like, why is he throwing that bottle at the tank? Not, why is there a giant tank in the street? And communists, a lot of the time, you'll see this, they'll talk about structural violence versus, like, actual violence. Or there's a different term they use for it, but essentially the kind of slow bleed, the violence that the capitalist political system inflicts on us every single day through, wage slavery and not having proper access to health care and not having proper health codes, and having plants like this explode, is not something that people are conditioned to notice. But we are conditioned very much to notice the incidents of when leftists fight back. I think there's the meme, there was a guy at Occupy with a big sign that said they only call it class warfare when we fight back. So I think it kind of ties into how we're perceiving this versus Boston.
Right.
I don't know. Did I lose people there? Sometimes my eyeballs
No.
roll back in.
No. I was like, and you know, you hear a lot of times where environmentalists will talk about particularly people interested in passing legislation to slow climate change. You hear a lot of talk of, is there any way to reframe this as a national security issue? Because people take national security issues very seriously. I guess you heard some of the same with the idea of of gun controls. Could this be reframed as a national security issue? Because when you say those words, suddenly the hair stands up.
Definitely. It changes the whole aspect of the subject entirely. I mean, it's like going from a 45 to a 72. And the whole thing on gun control. Okay, guns don't kill people. The people behind the weapon with the finger behind the trigger kill people.
Well, technically, it's the bullets that kill people. The guns just make them go really, really fast.
Gotta go ahead and nitpick. But I am for people being able to have a concealed weapons permit, being able to go ahead and carry a gun within reason. I mean, I'm for the extensive background checks and everything. I mean, I think it's necessary.
Most Americans are.
Yeah.
Mac, what's your opinion, by the way, on gun control? I don't think we've ever talked about that.
Well, I feel, when this debate emerged after Newtown, I realized how deeply, profoundly uninformed I was on a lot of subjects. The fact of the matter is, I can't sit here on this podcast right now and give you a definition of what an assault rifle is. I think before the debate emerged after that shooting, I thought that it was sort of a kind of a black and white thing, that there were a couple of measures that one could very obviously take. And then as I read more and more articles of people discussing it, it's like, okay, actually there's a whole lot that I don't know. There's a whole lot that I don't know about this sort of stuff. I mean, I don't think that I can fairly sit here and say that other amendments on the Bill of Rights should be respected. And that, like, if someone wanted to step up and say the Second Amendment should be repealed, I would be very open to hearing what the argument was about that. But if the Second Amendment is not going to be repealed, then what becomes important is to no longer have two highly polarized sides, the NRA versus people who want to get rid of guns altogether, but to start actually working with the productive middle, where there are actually some small, not solutions, that's the wrong word, improvements that could theoretically be, because I heard from quite a number of people. I didn't realize how many theater people are gun owners that I knew until I started seeing this debate raging on Twitter.
What, really?
Theater people are gun owners? But people I know from around the theater people I know around the country who have been like, I don't like the NRA. They don't speak for me, but I'm a gun owner. And I'm a lawful, responsible gun owner, and I'm willing to talk about some restrictions, some sane restrictions. The background checks being the most obvious one. But it does seem to me that there's got to be. With the current congressional situation, with the filibuster regulations being what they are right now, I don't honestly think anything can get passed. Yeah. But I don't understand why it's not possible. Okay, background checks, number one, and some kind of hard and fast definition of a kind of caliber of weapon that can discharge a number of rounds at a certain amount of speed. Isn't there some point at which we can draw the line and say, okay, private citizens can't have this? Because at this point, it's completely any notion that private citizens could defend against, if the government suddenly decided to become totalitarian and move on the American people. I don't think that's going to happen, but if it did happen, it's at this point it's preposterous to think that there could be some kind of armed private insurgency that would actually stop that from happening. Like that.
Yeah, there was an Onion article where it was like one guy with a shotgun in North Carolina is holding back the fascists.
Well, right. At that point, I mean, it may be a scary thing to say, but it's a realistic thing to say. That ship has sailed. So surely there has got to be some dividing line that reasonable people can agree on to say, let's actually limit the kind of weapons that make it really easy to kill a large number of people very quickly.
Well, the thing is here, and you can stop me if I'm wrong, okay? Is that this manure hill is so high right now. It's going to take, if you're going to go ahead and pass and create a decent gun control bill, it's going to take at least a decade to a decade and a half before you get in any headway.
I totally agree with that.
I have a gun control bill proposition, actually, and I'm surprised no one has brought this up. Actually, no, I'm not surprised no one's brought this up. But so the right-wing argument seems to be that guns prevent crime and protect citizens and protect us from a tyrannical government. And I think there's something to that to a certain extent. And then the mainstream left-wing, well, not Democrat criticism, because Democrats aren't left, but the mainstream Democrat criticism is that the wrong people have guns, and guns are very dangerous, and therefore we should make sure that the people who have guns are people who aren't going to go and shoot everybody up.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Here's my solution. And I've been meaning to bring this up on the Ed Till show, but I haven't, so this is the first time I brought it up. You guys can use that. So my idea here is socialized universal gun ownership. What we do is we pull a whole bunch of money out of the military or the police budget, and we put it towards equipping every single private citizen who is of age and has able body and mind with not only a weapon, not only with an assault rifle and a sidearm, but we also give them training, like military-style training in how to use them.
Well, wait a second. Hold on. Brent, You've already got a hole. You've already got a hole in there.
What's the hole?
Do you know where?
Where?
If that's the case, how are they going to go ahead and train me in cold fusion when we don't have the technology yet?
You mean we don't have the technology to train people to shoot guns?
No. See, I want cold fusion. I want cold fusion weaponry.
We can do universal cold fusion, but I think that's the other side. But
actually, there's something to this. A paramilitary country, you're saying. An entire paramilitary citizenry where every single person has a gun and knows how to use it and knows how to maintain it responsibly. Is that the idea?
Exactly. And what we do is we make sure that everyone has a gun, everyone knows how to use it, and that way I don't have to wait for a rich white guy who can afford a whole bunch of guns to play Batman when somebody runs into the Starbucks. Then everybody can have the guns, and we can decide how we want to go with there. And I do think I've dropped this off, and a lot of people, a lot of right-wingers have been like, well, you can't force people to have guns. Who's forcing anybody? You can sign a conscientious...
Who's forcing? It's a matter of choice.
Yeah, you can sign a conscientious objector form, then you just can't have a gun if you don't go through the training, because
right,
we don't want
exactly.
people who don't know how to. And why do you even want to?
And there has to be a battery of mental evaluations and psychological evaluations.
Yeah, absolutely.
That should be point number one right there.
Yeah. So, like the Swiss actually have a model similar to this, and I figure at this point either everybody gets guns or nobody gets guns. Let's just pick that. One or the other. I would personally prefer nobody gets guns and we all have to like stab each other. But I think if we're gonna have guns, let's just make sure that everyone has them and we don't have to wait for like the rich white guy to come in and save us when the terrorist or fascist or dangerous immigrant comes in and threatens us. We don't have to wait for them to play Batman.
Well, it's interesting what you said, because I have actually heard. I've heard it put forward as a serious proposal, not only with guns but also with the with the drug legalization argument is that, you know, I've heard it put forth in a couple of places, like, you know, the higher the caliber, the more of gun that you want, the more lethal it is, you know, to a large number of people, the more, like, the longer a training course you have to go through with a certified instructor. I'm talking about proposals.
That's actually kind of smart. I like that.
I'm talking about proposals, and the similar thing with the argument you sometimes hear with drug legalization is have the government basically sell, say, cocaine, and if you want to buy cocaine, you buy it for, it's like it costs like nothing, but you have to go through, like, you have to regularly attend counseling sessions if you want to buy cocaine. These are not, let me be very clear here, these are not things that I am advocating, but what you brought up reminds me of proposals I've heard where they say basically make everything legal, but have a sliding scale of training or counseling that goes with it.
Then we might as well become Denmark.
Hey, dude, there's some great things about Denmark. I mean, honestly, they used to be Vikings. They could be ruling us all right now.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you could go over to, instead of going to Starbucks for your espresso, you can just go on over and hook into the Wi-Fi, have some hashish and an espresso.
See, that's perfect. And honestly, I think I don't know if I talked with you about this, Mac, but I'm actually, though I've been getting annoyed with them lately, I'm actually a yippie. So, like, the Youth International Party from the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, their big issue is marijuana legalization.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the global marijuana march either just happened or is about to happen. I've unfortunately been in and out of the hospital with my girlfriend lately, but yeah, it's kind of a thing, but we won't get into that here.
Okay.
But especially last year when I was at the Global Marijuana March, like, it is absolutely insane that marijuana is illegal. And the only reason it continues, you talk to law enforcement, it's because, one, they get a whole bunch of bonuses when they bring in people on marijuana charges. That's how a lot of cops make their money. And then the other reason that it's still illegal is that we've moved to this system of private prisons in the United States that are operated for profit, specifically for profit, and it's so easy to just pack a prison with nonviolent drug offenders, and then you've got a workforce that works for, you know, a couple cents an hour, and you make a ton of profit. So really, like, we need to get some very, very serious drug reform in this country.
You know, and on the drug reform, I agree with you to an extent. You know, with the purpose of medical needs, honestly, I mean, I think the one thing that should be taken off is smoking myself. I mean, being an ex-smoker for a number of years. I mean, I smoked for like 18, 19 years. I blame basic training on it, but also I blame my own stupidity. But I went ahead and figured, you know, if we go ahead and just cut tobacco out of the loop entirely, and have them go ahead and take all that equipment that they use and use it for, you know, the medical marijuana, you know, and you know, have them go ahead and profit that way. I think it's a win-win situation.
I think it absolutely is.
You know,
you know what would be great is if they did it with, like, the pocket vaporizers that have been established. Because what that ends up doing is it releases the THC from the marijuana, and you can actually smoke it as vapor, and it doesn't mess with your lungs even as much as smoking something in. You still get high. It's actually, like, extremely healthy, especially compared to, you know,
well, compared to smoking a Marlboro, a Camel, a Lucky. You know, don't get me wrong. You know, I loved Lucky Strikes. They were the best. I mean, they were good for World War II. They were good.
Bob Hope Bob Hope actually he pushed Lucky Strikes a number of times, and I remember in college I bought Lucky Strikes because of Bob Hope, because I'm just that much of a geek. And then I realized, because I bought Lucky Strikes Unfiltered, and I was like, oh my god.
Yeah, it's definitely an acquired taste. Definitely an acquired taste. But let's go ahead. Let's get on to our next subject. Doctor Who. Now, I mean, we're coming up on season 7's season finale.
That's right.
The Name of the Doctor.
That's right.
Oh boy.
So, yeah.
I can guarantee you we'll get to the end of that episode without hearing the name of the Doctor.
Oh, you know what's going to happen. I haven't seen River as of yet. I mean, we've seen Clara and such, but we haven't seen River as of yet. I mean, are we good to assume that
yes,
River's out of the loop now?
No. Alex Kingston is going to show up on the last episode.
That's right. They released a poster for it, and that when where they build the stars at the top, and Alex Kingston was third build. River is definitely going to turn up in it.
Okay.
So, if in fact there is, if in fact one of the running theories is that Clara is River, then quite possibly she'll be meeting herself in that episode. I mean,
wait, what?
I mean,
that's a theory?
Oh.
There's every theory about Clara. Right now, there's basically every theory under the sun as to what her secret is, what's going to be revealed about her. And I mean, the fact of the matter is, okay, yeah, they released that the season finale is going to be called The Name of the Doctor. And of course,
but they don't say which Doctor, though.
That is true.
Wow.
It could end up being it's true. It could be a total trick. And Moffat did say there'd be a big revelation about the Doctor in that story, but he didn't actually. The title could be some kind of deception, because the fact of the matter is there's no actual name that they could come up with that would be remotely satisfying.
Right.
You could come up with some alien gobbledygook that wouldn't mean anything to anybody. You could come up with some ordinary human name that wouldn't mean anything to anybody. There's no whatever revelation is going to be is most likely going to be something other than a name. But it is an interesting thing. It's the longer Doctor Who goes on, the longer that it lasts, and it's in its 50th year now, the bigger a thing it is, the ballsier a thing it is to step up and say, I'm going to reveal something about the Doctor. You reveal something about the Doctor in the 5th year of the show, that maybe, but now everyone's like, who are you to reveal something about the Doctor?
Well, you got to take in consideration. I mean, as you said, it's been going on for 50 years here. Okay, but the thing is, people, is the Doctor only has 13 generations.
Yeah.
And it's
regenerations.
Well, regenerations, yes.
12 regenerations, 13 incarnations.
Right? Oh, yeah,
right.
13 incarnations. There we go.
Right, and we're on the 11th now. So, I mean, what's going to happen? Are we looking at maybe 10 years left of Doctor Who? Are we?
They'll figure out a way around that if they really want to keep it going.
I don't know, because I mean, remember, what was it? What was the episode? Let's beat up Hitler, or let's kill Hitler. Let's kill.
That was the worst way to approach that episode, if I can say. I really liked the episode, but if you have an episode titled "Let's Kill Hitler," what really should have happened was they should have kept going back in time and kept killing Hitler
over and over again
in more hilarious ways.
I have a feeling it was intended to be an attention-getting title.
Death by flatulent whoopee cushion.
Yeah, and then they stuck him in a closet for like all of the episode. They're just like, Hitler, get into the closet, and then it's all about River. What the hell?
Although the interesting thing was that the title, this I did not expect. This was a big surprise. The title went from being literal to metaphorical halfway through that episode. They go back in time. There's Hitler. They could do something to him. They put him in the closet. He gets knocked out of the story. And then you meet this crew of people that run the Tesselecta, the people inside this robot. And their whole thing is to go back in time and find dangerous people before they've done the worst thing they're ever going to do and torture them. And capture them and torture them. So in a weird way, Let's Kill Hitler ended up becoming metaphorical for the entire practice of punishing the worst evildoers in the universe. That was a big surprise to me that the title would end up sort of being symbolic by the end. But I think that is a frequent thing with Moffat, is that very often the literal ends up becoming the symbolic. That's sort of the journey that season 5, went from a sense of what's the literal peril to the Doctor to, by the end, the Doctor, the metaphorical peril of his story being erased. So it's one of those things where I could totally see where people could come at it from either way. Some people are like, I feel like since Moffat took over, the danger doesn't seem real anymore. I'm never worried anymore. There's no suspense. There's no peril. And I totally see that argument. I don't, but they say that he's changed the nature of what the peril is. And whether or not that works for you depends on how willing you are to kind of go into this, like, into the fairy tale dreamscape kind of storytelling that Moffat seems to favor for the show.
I'm a huge fan of Moffat. I've actually followed him from before Doctor Who, when he was like writing Coupling, which is like British Friends. Great show, by the way. And he's a phenomenal writer. He drives me absolutely crazy. And I think what it is like, a great example, actually. I will tell anybody who's going into Doctor Who, who's never seen a Doctor Who episode, go watch season 3 of the new series, Blink,
right.
which is the first introduction of the Weeping Angels. And that's the best episode to go in and see Doctor Who in my opinion. But then Moffat went, and the Weeping Angels, Doctor Who in general, like, what I love about it is that it makes me afraid of things I was never afraid of before. But then he goes, he ruins his own creation. And I can't even blame it on another writer or on another series. Like, we have the first Weeping Angels episode, and they're terrifying, like, in all the best ways, in a very childlike way. That episode kind of made me into a kid again, in a lot of ways. And he build them as the loneliest creatures in the universe, and they can never see each other because they have to keep their eyes covered. But great. They're horrifying and tragic. Then he brings them back again, and suddenly there's thousands of them inside an asteroid, and I'm just like, oh my god, that is the worst thing ever that I can imagine. And then there's also like people being blinked out of existence. And then when he used them in the end to kill Rory, spoilers, to send back Rory and why can I not remember?
Oh, Amy Pond.
Amy Pond. I always forget her name for some reason. And she's one of my favorite companions. But when he used them to kill Rory and Amy, he had them move to New York, and he made some really major changes. One, they could possess statues now. They were a consciousness inside already created statues, which contradicted what he'd already come up with.
Right.
Which was weird. But two, and this I found much more problematic, they set up a farm where they sent people back in time over and over and over again, which is very... It makes no sense whatsoever for Weeping Angels, A, to set up in New York City in those kinds of numbers, because they'd never, ever get to move, ever. This is the city that never sleeps. And someone's going to be looking at them at any point. And then why would they ever coordinate with other Weeping Angels if they see each other? They're frozen forever. That giant farm was just a giant death trap that would inevitably kill every single Weeping Angel there.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mind when they came back for the two-parter in season 5, but the Angels Take Manhattan was really a giant misstep.
And then they just killed him out of nowhere, and it drove me crazy. I had a thing I wanted to ask you about, Mac, because I have a theory about the 9th Doctor. I don't know, you have more of a broad range of knowledge of all the Doctors. You've watched the old ones, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you keep putting up really great episodes on Facebook, and please keep doing that so I know which ones to go for. Oh
yeah, it's great. Great fun. Yeah.
Yeah, but I have a theory about the Tenant Doctor, and I don't know if this extends to the other ones, but my theory about the Tenant Doctor is that he's an anarchist. That especially when you consider, in the extent of like the Daleks are very clearly fascists. They run on just hate. They believe themselves to be supreme, and they want to eliminate every bit of life in the universe that is not Dalek. Right. And as we've seen, they also will eliminate Daleks that they consider to be inferior.
Right.
Then you have the Cybermen, who are...
Sounds like a few politicians we know.
Yeah. And then you have the Cybermen, who are very, very obviously, in my opinion, communists. Because what they do is they have kind of the straw fear of communists, that they're going to come in and take you over and make you better than you want to be, whether you like it or not. They talk about upgrading.
Well, wait a minute. Now, are you saying that Davros would have been like Karl Marx?
In a lot of ways, yeah. Because I mean, Karl Marx kind of, I think Karl Marx's critique of capitalism threw a big spoke into what people at the time were thinking is, this is humanity, this is how we're supposed to be. And not only did he successfully criticize what we are and what we are now, and heavily criticize American culture, he also kind of planted this seed that led to so many revolutions. So, like, when you watch in season 9 and the Daleks come in and they go right out and they say it. They say we're going to upgrade humanity. We're going to eliminate class, race, and sex, all of which are actual communist goals, to eliminate classism, racism, well, class entirely, because it's the only way.
The thing is, I can't survive without sex.
No, sexism, and racism, like that. The whole concept, like the whole idealized society of communism, is the idea that we live in a place where the color of your skin doesn't matter, where who you're born from doesn't matter, where what kind of genitals you have, whether you're male, female, trans, whatever, doesn't matter at all. And a lot of people do get kind of horrified by that. So in that kind of thing,
I never understood that either.
Yeah. And it's great to watch the Daleks, like when the Daleks started talking shit to the Cybermen, I was just like, oh.
Yeah, that was one battle I would have loved to have seen. I mean, you could have dragged that out for like 3-4 episodes.
And nobody a season on its own. It really could. It's phenomenal. So my long point about the Doctor, and I do apologize for talking this long, is that I really think, especially the Ninth Doctor, is very much an anarchist in the classical anarchist tradition, in that we've seen him be anti-state. Like, you remember when he went to the Shadow Proclamation for help against the Daleks when they were stealing planets.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't trust them, and they told him, like, you're going to lead us. And he ran away from them and completely screwed them over and tried his best to cut them out. He doesn't trust human governments or human states at all. In fact, most of the time he mocks them. You saw that in the episode where was it the Daleks and the Cybermen? It was the Daleks where they were brainwashing people in that factory. Oh, no, wait, no.
Well, there was one where he specifically brought down the government of
England.
The prime minister, because she blew up the Sycorax ship. What is her name? Harriet Jones. He specifically brought down the 10th Doctor. We were talking about David Tennant.
Yeah. I'm saying the 9th. My bad.
He specifically started a rumor that brought down her government because she fired upon a retreating alien ship, which of course has. It's impossible to ignore the overtones to Thatcher and the thing of firing on a retreating Argentinian ship during the Falkland Wars. I don't know if Russell Davies was thinking that when he wrote that, but the symbolic the
symbolic undertones were there.
Yeah. It was And the Doctor's relationship with power over the course of the series is a really complex one, because I think overall, the way that he would like to think of himself is as an independent agent, who basically enters narratives. I've been writing about Doctor Who on Slate. I've been talking to like some Doctor Who super fans on there. One of whom I've talked to this week is a brilliant guy named Phil Sandifer, and his ongoing thesis is that the Doctor essentially is a disruptor of narratives. He arrives at a location where there is a set narrative in place, and he deeply disrupts it, and turns it into something else. Very often on the show, it'll be a specific genre of story. This week we had the haunted house story, but throughout the series there's been all kinds of different genres of storytelling, which by the Doctor's very presence they get interrupted and changed into something else. The haunted house is no longer scary. The haunted house is scary when the other people are there, or the Doctor's companion is there, because they don't know what to do. Then the Doctor shows up and suddenly it's not a haunted house story anymore, simply by virtue of his presence, because he looks past it. The ghost is not mysterious to the Doctor. It's a problem to solve. And once the Doctor shows up, you know it's going to change from a spooky, mysterious ghost story to a science fiction story that can be explained. It's going to be aliens. It's going to be tied in. It's going to be. We know we're going to get an explanation. We know that the mysterious thing is going to get brought down to Earth simply by virtue of the Doctor's presence. So now I can't speak to what I guess I don't actually know how to define an anarchist in the classic sense, but simply in terms of like there being a structure in place in every story. When the Doctor arrives, he shows up and he upsets the apple cart. The structure that was in place when the TARDIS materializes is no longer in place by the time he gets into it and goes away at the end. Now, there are stories where the Doctor has specifically arrived in totalitarian societies, and by virtue of what he did there, when he leaves them, they're in a state of being liberated as he leaves. I mean, maybe it's not clear what's going to happen in the long run, but there's one back in the 70s with the Fourth Doctor called the Sunmakers, or a totalitarian society where his arrival, he ends up bringing down the totalitarian government, and there's a full rebellion underway. But it's always complicated to assign too much political meaning to the Doctor, because the defining problem with him is that he goes away at the end of the story. He shows up, he deals with a crisis that's happening right then, and then he goes away. That prime minister that I was referring to a minute ago, who he brought down, her justification for firing on the alien ship, she says to him, "Doctor, you come and go. I stay. I have to make these tough decisions." The fact that he doesn't stay in any location means that ultimately he doesn't get to meaningfully interact with it in a way that's easy for us to politically analyze with the tools that we politically analyze any other situation. The ways that we analyze an activist or a person in power, we analyze them based on the fact that they have a permanent, ongoing relationship to whatever's happening. The Doctor shows up, there's a big problem, like a problem that has to be dealt with right now. He deals with that, and then he goes away. So it's very hard to pin him down in that fashion.
You actually went a long way towards proving my assertion there. I'm actually really happy you brought that up. Yeah, no, that was 100% right. It's really interesting. I think there's a line. I'm writing a play right now about the Catalonian anarchists. Okay. And there's a line. It's called "No Gods, No Kings" Part 1, because I'm going to do like a Part 1 and Part 2. And I stole this bit from a song about Durruti, who's a very famous anarchist leader that most Americans have never heard of. And it defines anarchism in a way as I'll give you the real world definition of it, and then I'll give you like the big romantic definition of it.
Right.
The romantic definition of it is that anarchism is the black shadow of the people against the brightness of power. And as power congregates, it actually creates anarchists, and they proceed to tear it down and then disappear, exactly like what the Doctor does. And in fact, most anarchists would argue that they need to disappear once the revolution has already happened. Because there can't and should not be a power structure to replace that. And that if they stayed around, there would need to be a new anarchist to come in and tear them down.
Right.
Now, Noam Chomsky, his definition of anarchism, which is the one that I like most, is the idea that those who argue for hierarchy, those who argue to say, I should be your president, I should be your king, your dictator, whatever. An anarchist is a person who puts the burden of proof on the person who argues for hierarchy. And if you cannot prove to be a king, a boss, a president, or whatever, if you can't meet that burden of proof, then the anarchist's job is to tear you down and replace you with something or nothing. Yeah. So I really do think that actually really ties into my theory, and I'd love to meet this guy on Slate because in a very literary sense, he has tied this into this political movement. I highly doubt also that Moffat or any of the writers intended him to be that way. I'd be very surprised if they were, but yeah, no, I'm geeking out right here. I told you, Steve. I told you this is why we should have the guy on the show.
Are we? Is it time for us to move on to another thing?
Yeah.
What is that?
What do you think, Steve?
That's a balloon. That's a balloon TARDIS.
Yeah.
Oh.
Ken's very talented like that. You should see what he does with condoms.
That's amazing. That's a balloon TARDIS.
Actually,
I did not recognize that at first.
I got this at actually my wife. We took it at it was that last convention we were at, 221B, I believe.
The Sherlock Holmes convention.
Yeah, somebody, of course, there's lots of being with Moffat and whatnot, and they talk about, Doctor Who obviously crops up from time to time. So, and somebody was just making balloons, and they made a balloon TARDIS.
That is amazing. That's fantastic. I couldn't tell what it was at first when you came in. I was like when you came in and held it up to the screen. I was like, oh wait, is that the gong? Have we been talking about Doctor Who too long? Because I couldn't. Then when I take a closer look at it, I see. Okay, all right, that's a TARDIS. Yeah.
He actually made a canine one too, but
that's fantastic.
It was cool. You should have taken pictures of it.
I love that.
My favorite canine line when he shows up during the Tenant season. And he's in the car with the boyfriend, who's just recently realized he's the tin dog.
Yeah, Mickey.
Yeah. Mickey. And he's sitting there, and he's like, do you have a laser? Is there a way we can get in? And K-9's like, we're in a car. He's like, yes, you have a laser. We are in a car.
That crucially is something that Russell Davies was very good at during his time. When he brought back elements from the old show, he was very good at sitting down and thinking, okay, what's the defining thing about this element? How can I bring it back in a way that goes beyond simple nostalgia? He was very good at capturing K-9's deadpan when he brought him back for that episode. He was very good at sort of saying, okay, this is what K-9's role is, and he was very good at remembering this is really key, because after a while on the classic show, they lost sight of what made the Cybermen different, what made the Cybermen not just metal bad guys or the bad guys that you bring in when people are sick of the Daleks or whatever. That the Cybermen had have their own identity, their own specific kind of menace. As you mentioned, Brett, the idea that they absorb, that they upgrade you, remove your individuality, give you improvements that sand down the ragged edges that perhaps you think define what you are, and that their defining line from when they were introduced in the series was, "You will be like us." That's what they would say back in the late 1960s episodes where they were first introduced. Their defining line of dialogue was, "You will be like us." The Daleks were not interested in taking people and turning them into Daleks. They wanted to kill them. The Daleks thought everyone else was inferior. The Cybermen wanted to absorb them. So it was, and after a while, the classic series kind of lost sight of that and just kind of made them both bad guys because the ratings went up a little bit when they would bring them back. The new series did do a pretty good job of, and has mostly maintained doing a good job of remembering that the Cybermen have their own specific menace. One that unfortunately Star Trek: The Next Generation, I hate to say it as a Doctor Who fan, but I have to admit they did improve on it a bit with the Borg. The Borg are scarier looking. There was a fantastic comic series recently where the 11th Doctor and Amy and Rory team up with the Next Generation Enterprise crew to fight an alliance of the Borg and the Cybermen. I had to laugh at what a fantastic piece of geek fan service that was, to team up the Borg and the Cybermen. But I have to admit, the Borg make the point a little bit more clearly. Because they're better designed. You can still see the human that was ruined by the the conversion process. You can still see the specter of the individual that once existed there, and that makes the point better.
Yeah. No, I think Doctor Who has always been about making ridiculous things incredibly scary. Like, you look at a Dalek, they look stupid. But then you see what a Dalek does, and suddenly you're hiding behind the couch.
Right.
I think the Cybermen would make a point, though, that, to have any sort of flesh still there is a weakness. Mm-hmm. And you had to get rid of that flesh. So that's why, in a way, they, are the full suit as opposed to the Borg.
Going ahead and going ahead and bringing it close to this topic here, we're going to the next topic here. I want to go ahead and share something here with everybody. So, without further ado, up next, the rollicking adventure with Doctor Who.
Yeah, Mac, if you click on the little thing, like the little field, it'll pull it up as your main thing.
Yeah.
The hell is this? Oh!
Can we get something about volume here?
Yeah, are we missing the music? Steve?
What?
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
I can't hear this. It looks awesome, but I...
Yeah, no, I'm not able to hear it either.
I think Steve probably's got his... He can hear it, but, it's not... Probably not.
Oh, he can't hear us. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand.
That makes sense. Well, it looks incredibly funny, and I think I would be laughing my butt off if I could hear what was going on.
What this is making me think is that I'm not sure the Daleks have ever been in the TARDIS in the whole 50 years of the show. It's a little bit shocking to see them in the TARDIS control room. I don't think they've ever been in there. The Cybermen and the Centaurans have both been in the TARDIS at times in the classic series, but I don't think the Daleks have ever been in there.
I wanted to ask you this, Mac, being that we're both writers, if you got the opportunity to write an episode of Doctor Who, what would you write about? I know you thought of it.
I have to admit, they've stolen my thunder a little bit with that by their recent announcement of who the bad guys are going to be in the 50th anniversary special, because the story that there's River, because the Doctor, my dream Doctor Who episode to write would actually be sort of a sequel to a 1975 story called Terror of the Zygons. A fourth Doctor story. It's about these alien creatures, these kind of like amphibious-looking creatures who they live in a spaceship that's under Loch Ness, and they get their nutrients from the lactic fluid generated by a giant creature that they brought from their home planet that lives in Loch Ness. That is the Loch Ness Monster.
The Loch Ness Monster.
They call it the Scaracin, but it's the Loch Ness Monster, and they've had it. They've lived there for millennia, and they have this big plan to take over. They've kind of reemerged, and they have this plan to take over the world. Of course, the Doctor defeats the Zygons. They're all destroyed by the end of the story, but the Scaracin goes back to Loch Ness to live peacefully out, the rest of its existence there. I've always wanted to do a story about, you hear story about people who go into countries where there are still active minefields, and at great risk, they go. Their part of it is to go in and disarm minefields, to go into areas where mines have been planted, find out where they are, disarm them, and get rid of them. Because there's like still like a lot of mines, a lot of like Eastern Europe, a lot of other places where they're a hazard and a threat to people. I've always wanted to see a story where the Doctor was basically recruited to disarm a dangerous by a galactic peace force to disarm a dangerous weapon that's still on Earth. Namely, this Loch Ness monster this Scarison that's living in Loch Ness. It's still there. It hasn't done anything, but if it was accidentally activated, it would go on a rampage and kill zillions of people. So the Doctor is sent. So this peace force asks him, "Help us. We need to smuggle the Loch Ness monster off of Earth." The ultimate caper. That's the script I would love to write.
That is a great script.
Like, how do you sneak something like that without anyone seeing it, and without making it go crazy and kill people?
Like Free Willy, almost. In fact, you could title the episode "Free Willy," or "Free Nessie" or whatever.
Free Nessie.
And if you could work in that shot of like the Doctor with the monster popping over him, like they did in the episode. The episode that I would like to write, if I ever get the opportunity. Here he is. He's back.
Hi, Steve. Can you hear us?
Steve? Oh, he's gone.
We can hear you, Steve.
I just think I would have a lot of fun writing an episode with different rooms that different Doctors have built, and then having to get through the various hazards in them. I think we could have a lot, and I'd like anything that gives us a chance to know more about sort of the world that the Doctor inhabits on a regular basis. Have there been any episodes like that?
Well, by astounding coincidence, the episode of Doctor Who that is going to be playing this coming Saturday, the title is Journey to the Center of the TARDIS. By sheer total coincidence.
Great minds think alike.
That's right. That's exactly. I mean, now there was a story where there was a story back in the 70s where the Sontarans invaded the TARDIS. And it was intended to be a very ambitious story to show us a lot of rooms inside the TARDIS, but they ran out of money. So it's actually comically bad. They ended up shooting a bunch of scenes in an abandoned hospital somewhere. So there's all these scenes where they're like running through, like there's like a big industrial sized swimming pool, and they're Sontarans are chasing the Doctor and kicking like pool furniture out of the way. It's really, it does not look good at all. It looks really bad. So part of the impetus, I read an interview with the writers, with Moffat and the writer of this weekend's episode. Part of the impetus to create this Journey to the Center of the TARDIS episode is they felt as if they needed to make up for that story that was called The Invasion of Time back in the 70s. They wanted to make a story where you actually get to dig properly into the interior of the TARDIS, see a lot of the rooms, and you know, see a lot of what's going on. And there's a very strong hint from the ad for it that that the Doctor is concealing some potentially scandalous secrets on the TARDIS. That they're
the gasp.
So I don't know what it is, what's going to turn out to be, but in terms of has it been done, not yet, but this weekend possibly it will have been done.
And it's all powered by gerbils.
That's where it'll be revealed. Oh, so see, we should tell you. We're not exactly sure what happened. We were not able to hear the sound on the animation, which looked awesome and hilarious, but we were not able to hear the sound on it.
That's weird, and that's like the second time that's happened before too, with the screen share.
So did it record us talking about it, or did it record the sound? Oh, okay. That's awesome. And when you popped off, did that stop the recording? Did you have to start a new one?
No, it still says that we're on air and that we're still broadcasting.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Well, when you were off, it said off air, but when you pop back on, it says on air now.
Yeah. So I apparently predicted the new episode of Doctor Who, which I really wanted to write, but that's all right. Somebody else can write it. But I will tell you, I'm going to be very interested to watch that, and I'm going to be watching that with a very critical eye. I'll tell you what, since we're doing this, let's talk a little bit about Mac's work as a playwright here in town. Can you? I know you did a really awesome. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about what you've been doing? And I'm particularly interested in that trilogy you had done recently.
Okay, well, the thing is, I think what may be of most interest for this podcast is that I principally focus on genre storytelling as a playwright, most specifically science fiction. Most of my recent plays have been science fiction plays. Which is not a very common genre to be used in theater, but I think that it's gradually growing. There's more and more artists who are introducing science fiction themes into plays for a number of reasons. I think the biggest one simply is that we're increasingly living lives that resemble science fiction a lot more than they resemble the lives of Chekhovian landowners. So it's increasingly dishonest not to have technology be a critical element of storytelling. I think the main thing, if you're writing about science fiction on the stage, you just need to figure out how to tell those stories in stage-bound terms. Now, the trilogy that Brent referred to, I wrote a trilogy of plays that my theater company produced last year. A trilogy of plays dealing with an extraterrestrial invasion of the Earth by insect creatures. Along the lines of what you'd see in Starship Troopers or Ender's Game, along those lines, a hive mind, intelligent insect race. The way that the trilogy worked was part one was set before the invasion and was basically about the humans that were abetting the invasion and showed how that happened. Part two was set during the occupation of the Earth and was about the insurgency, about the resistance, about the people who were fighting the aliens. And part three was set after the aliens had largely but not entirely been defeated, and the human race was sort of starting to rebuild, but there was sort of one last fateful encounter between the human race and the alien race that still had to play out to kind of define humanity's future. Now the key is that the way I figured out how to do it was to basically set all three parts of this story inside the same single living room of an upper middle class home in Florida. An upper middle, in part
Of course.
one, it was the home of the man. Yeah, I basically wanted to take that staple of theater, that hoary old warhorse of theater, the living room play, and turn that setting into something that could be epic. In part one, that's the home of the man, of the astronaut who is helping these aliens to invade. In part two, in the alien-controlled Earth, that living room that house has now become, in this local part of the world, has been basically where pregnant women go to in the last couple months of pregnancy, go to rest up and have their babies, and they're given a couple months to not work in the aliens' fields. They get to go stay in the and so of course that's where the insurgency takes place, because that's the one place where humans are left alone, where the insectoid aliens aren't watching over them, is in this home of where the heavily pregnant women are. So the director who directed these plays, she had this idea. She was like, "Oh my God, what if the insectoid aliens were totally grossed out by mammalian live birth? What if that completely freaked them out so that they don't ever go in the house?" So of course the insurgency would have to be run by 7 months pregnant women. They would have to be the ringleaders of the insurgency, and a huge light bulb went off. As a man, no one has ever seen that before. That is great. So, and then in part three, that same living room was now basically the courthouse of the new human authority, where people are brought on trial for crimes. That house has been kind of refashioned, and my wife was the set designer of all three of these plays, and so my wife had great fun first creating the kind of McMansion-y living room that it was in the first play, and then it was like this total and then the second play we made it all moldy. We looked at she looked at a lot of interiors of houses after Hurricane Katrina and stuff like that, to basically see you imagine a suburban home, an upper middle class suburban home. Now imagine that no modern cleaning products have existed for 10 years and that the world has been turned into a swamp. What would that home look like? So we covered everything with this paint that looked like mold. We had all this vegetation growing everywhere. All the glass in the windows was gone, And then in the third play, it was once again reconceived. All of the classic living room play furniture was gone. The couch that you see in every single play, that was gone, replaced by benches. It's now a courtroom, and on the wall is a big my wife designed this big mural that had all the names of the people in that local area who had given their lives to bring down the alien occupation. So it was a way of creating through the use of theater tools a science fiction story without, because here's where I think plays fall down, when science fiction theater can fall down. It's important not to try to be a movie. It's important not to try to be a TV show. I love movies and TV shows, but when you're writing a play, you have to write a piece of theater. And so there's no point in trying to compete with movies and television for special effects. You can't mimic the editing process. You can't mimic digital animation. So what you do is you replace those things with the things that do work on stage. We figured out a way to never have the aliens come on stage because, the house is the house isn't big enough for them to get into. We did work with sound effects. Jeannie Travis, amazing sound designer, she would create the effects of, we could hear the insect sounds outside the house. And this wonderful woman who creates props for 30 Rock, she created an insect leg that we brought on stage at one point, where a couple of guys had killed one of them and they come on stage with the leg. Zoe Morissette was her name. She built this for us. And the leg, it took 2 guys to carry it. It was a big, giant purple insect leg, so that you could get a sense of the scale of what they were dealing with right outside that house. But more important than any of those other things, more important than the sound design, more important than the big prop leg that she designed for us, more than any of that is the actors. Nothing brings across to the audience the truth that the world right outside this house is filled with giant insects, giant intelligent insects. Nothing brings that reality home more powerfully than the fear and hatred that the actors are playing. And the actors we had were so talented and so wonderful and so totally committed to this outlandish concept that I had written. Their fear, revulsion, grief when they lost somebody to one of them completely sold the audience on this reality. Ultimately, in theater, if your actors are giving authentic, lived-in, passionate performances that are honest, the audience will agree to believe in whatever they're believing in. That's the trick of theater, and that's how the trilogy ended up working. That's why we ended up having such a positive response to it, and that is, I think, points the way to which more science fiction can work on stage. I hope more people will write it. I hope more people will take steps, that I never even imagined. But the important thing is to remember those key tools.
Dude, I really want to see these plays, so please bring them back, because that sounds like the best thing ever.
Well, we had a great time. We had a really great time producing them. We knew it was completely freaking insane when we decided to do it, but it ended up working out. I do hope that that we will be able to bring them back in some form. Now, I have a play. We are producing a play in June of mine that we're about to go into rehearsal on. It's another sort of science fiction play. This one's more of a science fiction horror story. It's called Frankenstein Upstairs, and it's about two women who are a couple who they run a business together and they live together. They have a social media company in their own apartment in Dumbo, and they have a neighbor. This a very odd upstairs neighbor, this reclusive, strange woman named Victoria Frankenstein. And in the world of this play, that name means nothing to anybody. Mm-hmm. There is no novel Frankenstein by Mary Shelley in the world of this play. So she's just their weird neighbor with the weird accent whose last name is Frankenstein. They don't know what that means. And she's doing stuff whatever she's doing up there, it's causing them to have power outages, which is a big problem. They run a social media company. They do a lot of video conferences. So, they complain.
Like
right, yeah, exactly. So they can't be losing their Wi-Fi. They can't have the power going out. And whatever this weird lady's doing upstairs is causing their power to go out. So they complain, and they end up meeting her as a result of complaining about it. And then she ends up, working with them on it, and they end up becoming friends. And then a thing happens. Like a bad thing happens where suddenly this couple really, really needs Frankenstein's services. Those kind of services that only Victoria Frankenstein can provide. So the second act of the play goes from being this kind of like New York story about your weird neighbor to being a full-on horror story about reanimating corpses and things that have as a result of that. And we're presenting this play in June at the same theater in Long Island City where we did this this Alien trilogy. I've done a couple drafts of it. I've got one more draft to go, and then we're going into rehearsals. And I think so it's going to be my next test of how this science fiction on stage thing works. But I want it to be believable characters that totally seem like people that are totally relatable. But at the same time, we want to tell a full-on Frankenstein story and have it seem like something that grows out of real life. And so that'll be an interesting next test of this. Hopefully it'll be an entertaining and fun kind of horror story. I'm very excited about it.
Mike, have you thought about going ahead and doing a digital recording of this?
The problem that we run into with recording is some specific union regulations dealing with stage actors.
Equity actors are like vampires; they can never be photographed.
There are very specific circumstances under which you can, but they're very, very particular. But the union forbids actors in. The model under which I produce, because my company, we're a very small company, we don't have much money, is called the Equity Showcase, in which actors can perform in a play for about 3 to 4 weeks for very low pay. It was originally designed as a way for actors to be able to. It's called the showcase. It was originally designed for a way to actors to kind of show what they do on stage. It's for casting agents, but it's gradually evolved into a way that producers with lower budgets can. Yeah.
Right.
But the problem is, but equity does forbid the recording of these because that's essentially using the talent of the actors twice. I wish that regulation would get changed. I mean, I would be willing as a producer to basically I'd be willing to pay actors 2 payments: one payment for rehearsing and performing in the play, and then a second payment for being willing to allow their images to be used in a recording of
Absolutely.
it. Not to be able to show other people the play after it's closed. I mean, I would totally be willing to do a second payment if equity was willing to do a thing like that. That regulation against recording them is a bit of a pain in the butt, but I should say at the same time, I do feel very strongly that as a producer of theater, I don't want to get into situations where I feel like I'm exploiting actors' labor. There are very few workers that are quite so easy to exploit as actors because, like, coal miners wouldn't do it anyway. Coal miners don't know. If coal miners weren't allowed to mine coal, they wouldn't go find their own little mine and mine coal there for fun, and invite a few friends over to watch them mine coal in this little mine. But actors totally would do that. So I appreciate that Actors Equity and that the Screen Actors Guild have a very unique set of challenges in order to prevent their members from being exploited. So I'm very respectful of the spirit of those regulations, but it is disappointing, that we're not able to make the recording like you say, because it is a great idea.
It's very odd. It's very odd for me, honestly, as an anarchist and a producer, to find myself in conflict and be like, union! But
yeah, I have the same feeling.
But yeah, I completely agree with you, and I support Actors Equity 150%. That said, it does drive me crazy that I can't do these recordings. Mac, that's freaking awesome. Please send me the invite over Facebook. I'm going to do my own play, North to Maine. We talked about this on an earlier thing. It's going up for its 2-week run in early June, June 3rd to the 16th. So
okay, fantastic.
I'm going to do my best to make it out to yours, and if I get caught up, it's only because of that production, and it's been awesome.
We're overlapping a little bit. Mine basically opens mid-June and runs to the end of June. So that there will be a number of performances after you close, when that might be a much easier time for you to see it. But yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. Right at the fact that you guys are opening at the beginning of June, I can probably see like one of your very first performances, because that's just before I go into crazy time. So yes, please give me that information as well, and I will be
absolutely there. Coming out. We're going to be at the Cow Theater, same place I did Snow White Zombie Apocalypse, which is exactly what it sounds like.
I saw one version of that. I saw the shorter version of that at the Estrogenius Festival. Yeah.
You did? I remember that. Excellent. Yeah, that became the first scene.
Fantastic. That was tremendous. I love that. Yeah. Okay. That's delightful to know. But I don't know how this works. I don't know when we go from subject to subject, or how you guys have to run this.
Bruce, one of our other podcasters, was going to go ahead and meet up with us tonight to go ahead and talk about Defiance and such, and talk about the reviews and how it's been looked at as far as between the television show versus the video game itself. And some of the opinions, some of the public opinions that have, come to light, per se, since the premiere on the 15th. But unfortunately, he's not here today, for whatever reason. I've tried. I have no idea what's happened to them. So, we're actually we've actually gone a little bit
Way
on this.
over.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Yes, it is.
Although, I gotta say, I got something in the mail the other day, and I'm just going to go ahead and give a small shout out to one of our own who has gone ahead and left this podcast crew and started up their own. I'm talking about Zionic Freak, aka Dustin Copleen. Right here, the AD Police manga series.
From Bubblegum Crisis, right?
Right. Yes. Exactly. It's something that you can't really find. It's kind of hard to find these days. So I now finally own my own copy, and I have the entire AD Police series collected up.
Oh.
Protect and Serve, Parasite Dolls, the AD Police Files themselves, and now I own the actual manga.
What's the basic premise of AD Police?
These particular stories are have nothing to do with the Night Sabers. These actually go ahead. They talk about cyber crimes.
Hang on for just a sec.
Sure.
Mac, are you familiar with the Night Sabers series?
No, I'm ice cold to this. Like
okay.
So you've never heard of Bubblegum Crisis, then?
Yeah.
No. I know nothing about it.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So I'll lay it down, and then you can give him a more in-depth understanding. Bubblegum Crisis is one of the animes that first got me into the genre. It's essentially about a future Tokyo where there are these robots called boomers that they serve everybody. They do robot-y things. People have sex with them on quite often occasions.
Okay.
And then there's a team of women known as the Night Sabers who, when these boomers go insane for one reason or another, the AD Police is the unit that tries to take them down, and they tend to usually fail and die horribly. And then the Night Sabers come in, and they're a unit of women who get into these incredibly sexy robot suits and just beat the crap out of these robots and take them
Fantastic.
apart. Yeah. So Leon, why don't you...
Okay. All right. Yes. Basically, what Brent has said. Plus, I'm going to append to those. The company that goes ahead and creates that produce these boomers is the Denim Corporation. And of course, they cover up whatever they can wherever they can, like a cat trying to bury its shit on a hot tin summer roof. The Night Sabers was formed by one Miss Celia Stingray, whose father was the one who actually invented the Boomer AI, and because of what Jenna has gone ahead and done with the Boomers, she's gone ahead and formed up three women that were selected through a process of puzzles, acts of endurance, things like that. She trains them. They form the Night Sabers. They get hired out also by like rival companies like Hugh Geit, the Hugh Geit Corporation, which is a rival Boomer company.
Yeah, I remember they were kind of like the Walmart. They made some crappy boomers.
Yeah, they did. There's also the Sexaroid 33As, which were the ones that were
33S.
Was it 33S or 33As?
Yeah, S is for the sex.
Oh, Yeah, the prostitute boomers that people had sex with.
Well, right, but they were also mothballed and put into service in orbit for space exploration out on some of the orbital satellites that were in place.
Gross.
Have you seen Blade Runner, Mac?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Yeah, it's heavily influenced by that.
Definitely heavily influenced by that. If you get a chance to, I would suggest going ahead and watching the 89-90 OVA series. Okay. There are 4 parts for that, and then there are, let's see here. No, I'm sorry, 5 parts.
Okay.
And there's 3 parts for the Bubblegum Crash, which should have actually been a little bit longer. It was supposed to have been slated for 13 episodes, from what I understand, but only 8 were created.
Yeah, dude, you totally need to check that out. It's a very good series, and I think the scene where there's a scene where one of the characters, Pris, who is the most badass one, she cuts her own cast off so that she can fit back inside her cyber armor to fight more of these robots. And there's this great scene where she just is fighting another basically a super boomer, and she punches him, and I may be getting this crossed with another anime, but I seem to remember the 2 fists coming together and just watching her arm break inside the armor, and 14-year-old me was like, ooh.
That was the episode. I think that was in Crash. I think you're referring to Crash, where one of the corporations decided to go ahead and make 4 replicas of the lightsabers.
It may have been, yeah.
That's the one I think you're referring to. Yes.
Watching that on the old Sci-Fi Channel. So it is. I hate to mention this on my end, but it is nearly 12:15, and I've got to get to the hospital early tomorrow.
Yes.
So can I duck out?
Yeah. Yes. In fact, it's always a pleasure to have you on here, Brent.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, and we will see you possibly in about 2 or 3 more episodes.
Please. We'll talk about North to Maine, and Mac, I'm totally down with seeing your stuff. I hope to see you very soon.
Absolutely. All right, all the best. Talk to you soon. Take care. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Catch you later.
Right. So, Mac, are you ever going to? Will your place ever hit the national road?
I sure hope they will. I'm doing a bunch of stuff right now to try to bring them to a higher level of prominence. None of which, or basically almost none of which, I can actually talk about because it involves ongoing negotiation with different people. It's good. I feel ridiculous saying that, like I'm some.
I'm not at
liberty
example. Well, as an example, we had the Doctor Who parody, Doctor You, out here back in January, and everybody loved it. They thought it was great because it was an opportunity to go ahead and see an off Broadway parody play off of one of the world's coolest sci-fi series. 50 years. You can't sneeze at that.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. I would love to have tours of my stuff, be able to get out there and engage with audiences around the country, because there's a lot of great theater scenes around the country, and you can get a little bit of tunnel vision, being in Brooklyn or whatever. I would love to do that sort of stuff. I'd love to tour around it. I hope it's in the next couple of years to make it possible, and to also license my plays to be performed by other theater companies around the country, to kind of get a sense of how other people react to them, how other people feel about them. So I hope to make that happen in the next couple of years. And try to reach a larger audience with them. So we'll have to see if I'm successful at that.
Well, we wish you the best luck, and we'll hopefully have you here on the show again here in the near future.
It'll be a great pleasure. I've had a fantastic time. Max, is there anything you want to? I feel like I've been talking over you all night. Is there anything you want to say?
No. Sometimes let people ramble. So.
Well, I've had tremendous fun rambling here. I've enjoyed this greatly. And if you guys have me back sometime, I promise to be better read up on the political stuff. I basically, when you said Texas, I was like, I know almost zero about Texas, much to my embarrassment. But I will be reading up on it directly after this. But I'm very grateful to you guys for having me on. I've had a really good time.
No problem. Glad to have you on the show.
It's great to meet you guys. You can take care. Have a good night.
You as well.
You too.
That's going to be us for tonight. Join us again next week, and we will see you then.
All right. Good night.
Cybernauts heading off.